The MLB offseason can be a tricky thing to get a handle on in MLB the Show 24. For those trying to learn baseball through the game, or even those who know the sport but haven't had much experience in the game, there's a lot to do on a year-by-year basis, much more than the other sports video games. 90% of your roster needs at least some sort of attention every single season. And today, I'm going to show you how to avoid some crucial mistakes when it comes to the offseason in MLB the Show 24, like not filling a big enough roster to have a AA team and other common mistakes. Now, I do want to say here right at the start, if you're somebody who is very familiar with the MLB the Show 24 off-season system and you're looking to gain like that extra edge to fully maximize every single spot on the roster, this isn't going to quite be that video. This video is more for the beginners because the game doesn't really hold your hand through this process. You need to kind of figure it out on your own, and I'm going to show you the strategies that I use. I'm not going to claim to be some sort of expert on the MLB the Show offseason, but I do know enough to make sure that I avoid the big mistakes. So with that being said, let's hop into it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about before we actually get to the offseason itself here is at the very onset of a franchise, you get to this screen. Now, you can change these later, but you want to have every single thing on manual. I've heard a lot of comments from my videos that they see their team is making too many decisions with the roster on their own. A lot of it is because they'll have set lineups and rotations on auto, or they'll have stuff like contracts and waiver transactions on auto. If you want full control of your team, you have to do it here. And then there's a couple other things that you have to do to avoid the CPU making decisions for you, because even if you have everything on manual, they will still occasionally make decisions for you if you don't do certain things to avoid them. Those certain things I'm going to talk about in just a minute later on in this video. But with this out of the way, let's get to the off season itself. The very first page you're going to see here in the off season is the retirement screen. For those who are, longtime baseball fans, you can see some of the fun players like a Justin Verlander, for example, to retire. But for the most part, you just want to pay attention to your team for any unexpected retirements. For us, we only have one. Not going to play much of a big impact on what our plans are for the offseason. So we'll advance here by pressing B, and then you'll see if anybody makes the Hall of Fame this year. That is not the case. So we get here to the first screen, and this period of the off season lasts until you see this first star here on the force. So anything we want to do in this part of the off season, we want to try to get done before then. Now, the first thing I do every single off season is take a look at my scouting staff. For many of you, if you have terrible managers, guys with C grades, you'll want to fire these guys in many cases to get better staff. But for us here in this off season, we have everyone that's an A or a B. You can still probably, again, if you're trying to absolutely maximize every single thing in the off season, maybe fire some of these guys. But for us, we need a pitching coach and a third base coach. So you go here, you can look for, if there are specific ratings you want up, that's good. You could also look for coaches like Tom Zhang here who don't have any negatives about them. Whatever it is you're looking for, I honestly, for the most part, just give them offers that will give them a full bar, because they're just more likely to sign with you if they have full interest. Again, could you maybe sign them for a little bit less? Probably, but I don't particularly care. We'll just go something like this. We'll maybe add another year here, try to get it a full bar. There you have it. And then, if you want to spend the time to go down bit by bit to see exactly where the breaking point is when their bar becomes not full, you could do that too. But for the sake of this video, we just give them a couple of full bar offers. Sometimes they won't accept even if they are fully interested in the offer. just go in and you give them another coach a chance here. The second thing to do here in this early portion of the offseason is to take a look at your free agents. Now, these are the list of players that will enter the free agent pool that will be available in the second part of the offseason. These are typically guys that want to start making some money. And so you have to ask yourself, is the player worth it? Honestly, what metrics you use to determine that is kind of up to you. For me, I'm looking for a blend of ratings and, good production. A guy that's just pitched over a 5 ERA, not looking to retain him. A Lucas Sims, a little bit better, but I still don't know if I'm paying him. So you just go down. Are you comfortable with what you're getting from each of your guys? In the case of the team that we chose for this video, the Reds, not sure I'm giving any of these guys an offer. So we lost one player to retirement. We're also losing 8 players here to free agency. So we've got some holes to fill. Typically, these can be filled by a draft class. You're adding 7 players, sometimes more, in a draft class. At the very least 6 if you signed everybody in your draft class. So this will just kind of help replace what we're losing in the free agent pool. So I've done everything I want so far. So now I am ready to advance. We get one coach to accept. If we advance day by day. Now, I probably should have offered somebody a little bit lower because I did want to show you how to access the coaching tree should someone reject and you're already in the second phase, but I could just show you where that screen is anyway. And it looks like there's already some trades going on here in this offseason. So once you get to the 4th, you will get to the second stage of the offseason. And that's where now the entire roster needs to be taken care of. Anyone who isn't on a multi-year deal, which let me just tell you, there are not a lot of players on your team that are going to be on multi-year deals. If you need to go and access your coach's screen because somebody rejects from here, it is on this handshake icon on these upper right hand circles, coach contracts, and here is where you could offer more players contracts if you need to. So that's how you do that. Now, how do you go about this second period? This is the most important period of the entire offseason, is this second period. The first thing you want to do is go to the select 40-man roster screen. This screen shows you every player that is currently on your roster that you are eligible to lose via the Rule 5 draft. And if you don't know what that is, we'll talk about that later in the video. But basically, if you don't put them on your 40-man roster, they're going to be put in a pool of people eligible to be drafted by other teams, just stolen right from your roster. So anybody that you can't lose, that you really want to keep on the roster, make sure you go here. And let's just say we had one B potential pitcher, right? And he wasn't a very high overall, but let's just say I really wanted them anyway. But what's his position? It's a reliever. For some reason, I thought it was a starter. So let's just say we really don't want to love Justin Bruihl. I don't know how to pronounce that name. I'm sorry if I am butchering it, but I don't want to lose him via the Rule 5 draft. So we go here and on the bottom, add to the 40-man roster. Now, if we go back to the select 40-man roster screen, he is no longer there. He was initially the first player on the list, but now a team cannot steal him from us in the Rule 5 draft, so we're good. And you would just go through and do this with every player that you're not comfortable losing in the Rule 5 draft. Now, beware, I can't just do it with everybody who looks kind of good because you only have 40 spots. And 26 of those spots need to be guys that are playing in the major leagues. So don't just add everybody, add the players that you really think are factors into the future and would be really tough to lose in there. From there, the second screen I go to always is tender contracts. And this is the list of, it's going to be the majority of your roster will be on this list. And all of these guys need to be signed to a contract. And there are a lot of players, a lot of them are terrible. I'm going to show you my strategy on how to do this screen. The first thing I do is you'll notice some players have this contract renewable status on the far right. Those are the guys I take care of first. I go through every single one and decide whether or not I want them. Now, these guys with the contract renewable, they'll be asking for roughly $700,000, $800,000. So less than $1 million, not a ton of money here, but it's still a lot more than other guys that we'll see on this screen. For example, the guys who do not have the contract renewables screen, you'll see making an offer. This guy's a bad example of it. Let's go to Rhett Lauder. Here, he only wants $80,000. He wants roughly 10% of the money as the guys with this contract renewable status do on the right. So first thing I do in this list, I go through every single person that has it. Are they worth, $700,000 or $800,000 compared to that, $80,000 I can get by getting a younger player? And for the case of Matt McCain, obviously he is worth, he's 87 overall player, worth paying less than $1 million pretty easily. Now, you can change the money here. You can even lower it if you go to make an offer. You can lower this money if you want to squeeze every last, 100,000 you can out of the team. Absolutely, you can do that. The one option had us paying him $760,000. We can pay him only $600,000, and he has full interest in it. So if you want to save, if you're at a point in the franchise where the money you have to spend is getting pretty small, I would recommend doing this. But for the most part, we have 122 million, so it's just going to be a lot faster to do this. They'll instantly accept doing it this way as well. So that's an added benefit. You just get them off the list. So oftentimes guys that are, in the high 70s and in the 80s, always going to be worth paying, $750,000 to. So you just go player by player and you do this. Now, I don't need to show you me doing this with every single player, but there will come a point, like let's say Carson Spears, 64 overall, D potential. Is he worth paying 10 times the salary nearly of this guy right here who wants only 60? That's over 10 times the salary? Probably not. So what I do is I have myself a little notebook and I write down everybody on this list, on this contract renewable that I don't want to pay. And I'm going to do that. So I'm going to decide if I want to pay them, I'm going to offer them this. If I don't, I'm going to write their name down on the notebook. I'll see you when I've done that for every single player with this contract renewable tab. All right, so I've gone through every single player that has this contract renewable status, and I've either renewed their contract or I've written them down to be released right here in my notebook. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through, I'm going to go player by player, everybody that I have identified here. Oh, he's a left fielder, that's why I can't find him. We're just going to release him off the roster. Now, there is no penalty here because they are not currently signed to a contract with the team. So there's not really much that's going to keep you from doing this. You have Roa here to release. So you just go everybody that you decided to release, you go to and release them. Now, I will say this part is not at all necessary. If you just decide not to re-sign them, they will eventually leave your roster anyway. The reason I like to go out and release them from the very start is just because it lets me know where my roster sits in terms of how many players I have at each position. We'll talk about that once we finish up with the tender contracts screen. Now, I'm going to go through here and back to the tender contracts screen. I'm going to, once again, now we're going to go through every single player remaining. We're going to skip over the guys with the contract renewable. They'll show up on the screen for like a day or two, but once you sim a couple days, they'll just be off this screen because they're not on your team anymore. And every single person that's asking for like $100,000 or less, I just sign them. I just offer them the contract. Now, you'll get down to the players in the 50s with deep potential. You're like, really? Am I signing this guy to play baseball? This guy shouldn't be getting paid to play baseball. No offense to Pedro Garcia. I don't know him personally. I'm just saying, in the game, according to these ratings, I don't want to pay this guy. I would still offer them the contract, because at the end of the day, if you find a good replacement player, if you find an upgrade and you release him, it's only costing you $60,000 in the end. So there's not really any downside at all to signing these players, because there's no guarantee you're going to find an upgrade, and you need a lot of bodies. Again, something we're going to talk about very soon. Now, there will be some players here. Connor Overton is going to be a good example, where you go and they don't want the 1 year, $80 million. He wants over $700K. These are guys that, are going to be older prospects. They have some MLB experience. They're not guys that are, career minor leaguers. They're going to ask for the big contracts. Again, ask yourself if it's worth it. If it is, offer them the contract. If it's not, add them to the list that you're writing down and releasing. For the case of Connor Overton, we'll just do it just because, as you saw briefly, our starting pitching numbers are already pretty low. So I'm just going to sign him to a big contract here. Would I do this if I was doing a Reds franchise? I don't know. That's up to you. But I'm going to go through every single player. Again, if they're asking for like 100K or less, we're just going to give it. And if they're asking for more of the Connor Overton deal, it's just personal preference. Do you think that guy is worth that contract? So I'll see you when I am done with all of that. I'm now here through the renewable contracts. I offered Connor Overton a much more reasonable contract than I had initially given him. I've either released everybody or I have offered them a contract in this screen. And now what this does, I think I actually forgot to do one release now that I am going through it. I mean to release Gilbert here. But now I've officially either offered everyone a contract on that screen or I have released them. That gives us a better idea of kind of where we sit numbers wise after renewable contracts. We know that our pitching is running a little bit low, as you can tell, only 12 out of 15 required. So we're going to need to add some pitching, and we're going to need to hopefully avoid losing any more if we can help it. So next screen here is offer salary arbitration. Now, these are the guys I didn't mention here. Tender contracts is for your players with between 0 and 3 years of MLB experience. That's why you can sign them for so cheap. Basically, the way the MLB works, until you've actually gotten some experience at the major league level, you're getting paid peanuts. That's how it works in this game. And the players don't really have much say in it. Once you hit that 3 years of MLB experience, between 3 and 6, you get to arbitration. Now you're making a little bit of money. You have a little bit more to say as a player into what you're making, but at the end of the day, the team still has control over the player. What arbitration means is that if you cannot come to a contract re-sign prior to a certain spot in the off season, the team will suggest what the player should be making, and a player will suggest what they should be making, and a neutral arbitrator will decide which one is closer to value, and that's what that player will make. So when you click on a player in arbitration, you'll get two offers: make an offer or offer arbitration. Typically, if I want a player to return, I'll always first click on make an offer, go down to 1 year, see what they want. Here in the bottom right, you can see that Alexis Diaz thinks he should be making 1.9 million this year. And why I do that first is just when I offer arbitration, I know kind of what ballpark he's looking at. So I know if I lowball him here in the 800,000s, that's way below his ideal salary, right? So if this ends up going to arbitration, if I can't re-sign him prior to arbitration, he's likely to win. We're likely to pay a lot more. So I'll make my arbitration something a little bit less than that, maybe like a 1.4. I think I have a chance, maybe a 1.5. I think I have a chance of winning that if his expected salary is 1.9. Close enough. I have a chance to win arbitration here. He still has a chance as well, but then I can go in. Alexis Diaz, great closer, coming off a 3.3 ERA season. Yeah, let's lock him up long term. We can say, you know, you're our closer. And so for 5 years, we'll say $5 million a year. Bada bing, bada boom. If he does not accept that contract offer, it'll eventually get to the point in the offseason where there will be an arbitration hearing and we'll see who wins it. But either way, because we have offered him arbitration, he is 100% on the roster. Much like I do with the previous screen, the tender contract screen, I will go through every player. Is it worth it? We'll go to make an offer, go to 1 year, because you know you only have to sign these guys to 1 year. You can offer them multi-year deals, but for a guy like TJ Antone, I probably wouldn't offer him more than 1 year. We'll maybe boost it one over his ideal salary. Give him a 1.6 offer here, and then I'll also offer him arbitration, and we know he wants 1.6, so we'll offer him something like 1.2. So he wants 1.5, excuse me. So offer him a little bit below what his expected value is. You'll go through every single player here, do the same. If you want to sign them long-term, you can offer them a contract. You can offer them a 1 year deal. You can offer them a multi-year deal. It doesn't matter. If you want them, offer them, but make sure you also offer arbitration. If you only do this, let's just say Lodolo, I want him. Let's say he doesn't accept that and I never offered him arbitration. He's going to be gone after a certain point. You have until, I believe on the calendar, it is this 23rd. Sometimes I forget which star is which, but I believe it's this 23rd. If you have not offered arbitration after this and they have not signed to the contract, they enter the free agent pool. But if you have offered arbitration by this date, they will be on your team next year, no matter what. So much like I did with the tender contracts, I'm going to do a lot of this off camera. I'll be back again. If I don't want them at all, I'll write their names down and we will release them right off the bat. And I'll see you when that's all taken care of. All right, there you have it. Everyone has either had their arbitration offered or they have been released. Now, we get to a very important part of this offseason. We've decided who we want to keep. We've offered contracts to everyone who we want to keep. So we know for a fact we have 67 players on the Reds coming back next year. I kind of wish I had signed a draft class before this because we're missing a lot of pitchers and that would help me out for this offseason. I didn't sign anybody in the draft because I was just simulating to the offseason. And so nobody came in from the draft. Definitely would have had a few more pitchers than we do now, but it's fine. Now it comes to how do you know how many players you need to sign? For me, it's pretty simple. You have 3 teams that you need to fill, and each team has 26 spots. Now, you don't technically have to have 26 players on each roster. You have to have a minimum of 20. 20 is the absolute minimum you can have. But come September, you have to have 28 players at a minimum on your MLB roster, which means at some point you're going to need an absolute minimum of 68 players. I wouldn't recommend doing that though. I'd recommend having enough to fill all 3 rosters throughout the entire year and have a little bit extra room for injury. If you don't have injuries on in your franchise, then you don't need the little bit extra. But my ideal roster construction for a team, a 26-man roster, is to have 6 starting pitchers, 7 relievers, that includes relievers and closers, 2 catchers, and then you have 6 infielders and 5 outfielders. I think in the ideal world, that's how a 26-man roster is constructed. So in order to account for that for all 3 teams and have a little bit of space for injury, I like to have at least 20 starting pitchers. I have to have 20 relievers between closers and relievers at a minimum. I like to have at least 7, sometimes 8 catchers. And then I like to average 5 players at each other position spot. Now, spots that can often, you know, play each other, I think you can have less than 5. For example, this team currently has 6 third basemen, but only 4 first basemen. The reason I don't feel like I need to add a first baseman is because third base often has first base as a secondary position. You can see there's one here, there's also one here, and one here. So we have 4 players that have first base flexibility. So because of that, I don't feel like I need to get that 5th first base and have a lot of other players. Same for like second baseman and shortstop. Those positions can also often play each other. Corner outfield spots can often play each other. So, you know, we have 6 left fielders, only 4 right fielders. I feel like that's enough corner outfielders. We have 10 total. It's about what I feel like I need. Center fielders, I like having guys that are actual center fielders for the most part, because those guys typically have a little bit more speed and are better fielders. So I want 5 actual center fielders. And then catcher, the reason I like having 7 or 8 catchers is a catcher secondary is pretty rare in the game. You do find players that have it, especially I feel like it's more common even in like the guys that you draft than it is in real life. So it's just so rare to have catcher secondaries that you want 2 on each team in case one gets injured or just needs a day off. And then you want 1 or 2 extra to have as injury insurance if you have injuries on. Again, if you don't, you can just have 6 catchers. So with that being said, taking a look at what we need. We only have 9 total middle infielders. I want that to be 10. So we need to sign either a second baseman or a shortstop. And this is what I'll write down. Middle infield, we need 1. For starting pitchers, we need 8 starting pitchers. The pitching situation on this base Reds roster is pretty bad. Again, if we had actually signed a draft class, it wouldn't be this bad. We probably would have drafted 2 or 3 pitchers at minimum in that draft, if not even more, because of how pitcher needy this team is. But because we didn't sign a draft class, we need more. And we have 15 total relievers between relief and closing pitching. So I need to sign 5 relieving pitchers. I also need to sign at least 2 catchers, if not 3. And that's it. Everywhere else, I have what I feel like is the minimum. So going to this free agency, again, I know I need to get 1 middle infielder, 8 starters, 5 relievers, and 2 to 3 catchers. So I'll go to those positions. Do I need MLB caliber of those players, or do I need minor league caliber? For the starting pitchers, I have enough players that I could, you know, field an MLB team next year. I have 6 starters. That's what I want at an MLB level. So I don't need, I'm not pigeonholed into signing guys that could play in the MLB next year. But, you know, we could always splurge a little bit and get a fun starting pitcher if we want to. What I really need is a lot of minor league arms. Just the minor league arms in this base Reds roster are terrible. For relievers, I currently have 4 guys that are on the major league roster, 5 with our closer. I think Santillan could very well be, you know, like an MLB caliber relief arm. So I think we could add him. In fact, I think I will in this case. So we know we have at least 6. We need 7. So I need to add an MLB caliber reliever at the very minimum 1. Could add more if we need to. But again, a lot of these relievers that I need to sign are going to be minor league arms. And then at the MLB level, I need to sign 1 more MLB catcher at the very minimum. We only have 1 on the MLB team. So out of the 2 or 3 catchers I'm going to sign, one of them needs to be an MLB caliber player. And then for my middle infielders, I have 1 shortstop and 2 second basemen. That's probably fine. I don't necessarily need an MLB caliber player there. That can also be a minor leaguer. So now that I have that knowledge, now that we've done all this, this is a lot of setup, all to be ready for free agency. In free agency, the first thing we need to do is take care of our absolute needs. We only need 2 major league players that are just absolutely required. We need a backup catcher. It doesn't need to be a great guy, but we need somebody that we're comfortable as a backup catcher. For me personally, I typically look for good defense in my backup catchers. So we could go with a guy like Travis d'Arnaud, of course, super old, or just ask him to be a backup for a year. So we'll offer him $4.5 million. It's gonna be a backup catcher for us next year. And then I need one reliever. That's gonna be an actual. I'd go through here. Let's just find somebody who's coming off a good year. Here we go. Let's offer a 2-year deal. Wants a little bit of money coming off a good year. We'll give him $5 million a year for the next 2 years to be a good reliever for us. There you go. We have the bare minimum, the major leaguers we need. Now you can go through and start to look maybe further down the board. Look for some young guys that aren't going to ask for much that could be part of your major league team. You have a 23-year-old here. Not going to be a good long-term player, but going to be very cheap. $70K, you got this player to be a minor league player for you. So you just go through and you find some solid young players is really what you're doing. I'm not going to do this for all. I'm not going to show you me taking all 8 of these starting pitchers, but this is pretty much what I do to fill out the minor league system, stuff like this. And then once we have all of our needs taken care of, then you can start to look at the fun players. If you have enough money to go after a Soto or a Burns or a Torres, something like that. The reason I do all of that before I even look at free agency, is we know how much money we have to work with. Because you can see, oh man, I have $112 million. The first thing you do in the offseason is you look at free agency. I have $112 million. Let's spend it. Let's get both Soto and Torres and build this sick team. Well, $34 million of that is already being committed. Probably by the time I'm done offering everybody I need to, it's going to be closer to $35 million. And so you need to know how much you actually have to work with after everybody else on the team is signed. And then you know how much you have to work with. We don't have 112 to work with. We have, what is that, 80, 70 something to work with is what we actually have in terms of a budget. So I always recommend, before even looking at free agency, get every single person either signed or released in your tender contract, every single person either signed or released in your arbitration. Only then you dip into the free agent pool. And also with free agency, sign the guys that you absolutely have to, by requirement, sign before you start to look at more of the fun options. So I'll be back once I've gotten offers on every single need that I have, and then we'll see what we've got left for a couple of maybe just fun additions for the sake of the video. All right, I have offered everyone that we absolutely need to. These are all the positions that we need to address. Is anybody here super exciting? No, to be honest, they're not. But again, this isn't the exciting part of free agency. This is the bare necessities. This is the minimum. And the question becomes, would you rather pay a 31-year-old pitcher 62 overall, $700,000, or would you rather pay Finley Rivero $70K? Yeah, he only has D potential, but at the end of the day, it's still better than the alternative of paying, 10 times the salary to somebody who might even be a little bit better than some of these guys that we're signing, but they're just a lot older and 10 times more expensive. So here we go. We got a lot of guys. Again, nobody super exciting. Sometimes you'll find good guys like, in the mid 60s with B potential. You can certainly find that. Wasn't the case in this free agency. So now we know, again, our pending offers are up to $35 million. We have 112 projected surplus. So now we know that we've offered all of these guys. We have everything that we need to do out of the way. We know exactly how much we can spend on. We can get like a Pete Alonso, just an absolute power bat. We can get a really good pitcher. And at that point, it just take a look at your needs. What do we need? Could really use a high quality starting pitcher. We'll probably offer one. We could really use a first baseman. So now I'm thinking we offer Pete Alonso. Third base is a spot I feel like we could hit. Although we have, that's actually not true because They have Matt. I guess they have Matt McLean playing second. I think between McLean, India, and Ellie De La Cruz, you have second, short, and third figured out. So a first baseman here, and then in the outfield, we got Steer, we got Friedel. I think we could use one more outfielder as well. So now you go into free agency. You know exactly what you have to work with. We can offer, 4 years and say $12 million a year to Pete Alonso. Be the top offer there. We can go into one of these pitchers who's coming off a solid year. I mean, Corbin Burns is. I don't know if we want to offer the best player here in Cincinnati. But what about Shane Bieber coming off a good year? Is he actually asking for more? Is Montgomery? Montgomery's coming off a good year. A little bit older though. Again, I would spend more time on this if this was actually a franchise series, but let's just say we wanted to sign, oh my gosh, 20 a year. What about Walker Buehler? You see potential in him? Okay, that's interesting. What about John Means? John Means, 79 overall, coming off a great year, only asking for $7 million a year. Probably want more like a 3-year deal. We'll offer him extra $1 million per year, something like this. And then what about a cool outfielder? Is there a good center fielder? What about like a Kiermaier? What did he do last year? Hit pretty solidly. 750 OPS. You know he's a really good fielder. Let's see if we can't get him away for 2 years at 18 mil, something like that. Bada bing, bada boom. We don't have to spend all of our money in 1 year, of course. But now you're starting to see some more exciting players. We even still have, if we actually wanted to splurge a little bit on pitcher, we could go with a Shane Bieber, even though he's asking for a lot. Could go with the Corbin Burns. How much is he actually asking for? Burns is asking for this same amount. I'm just gonna offer this. Why the heck not? The point is, you know exactly what you're working with if you get everything that you need to do done before you get everything that you want to do. And now we wait. We'll see who signs with us. Josh Naylor is acquired via trade for Contreras. Interesting. Corbin Burns. There you go. We get Corbin Burns onto the team. Massive signing for us. So this is the 20th. And you always pay attention to these. Let's just triple check. Is there anybody here that we're worried about losing to the Rule 5 draft? I mean, Overton at 73 overall might get taken, honestly. We're up to 22 starters now, right? Because we offered the guys that we needed to get to 20, and then we offered 2 more good players. So Means also signed. Let's see, did we get Kiermaier signed? We still have not got Pete Alonso. But Darnell signed to play with Stevenson. Let's just see. What's the situation looking like for Alonso? You know what? He's a great player. Let's not offer him an extra $1 million. $13 million for this caliber of hitter. Let's do it. Why not? Make him maybe a little bit more interested in signing, or we could go for Juan Soto, who's getting just dog buns offers right now. I think we'll stick with Alonso for now. Today's the last day to offer arbitration. So again, we can triple check. Everybody on the arbitration we either released or is already re-signed. We didn't even have to go to arbitration in this offseason. I probably should have kept somebody for arbitration just so I could show it to you. But it is what it is. Pete Alonso to the Reds. All of a sudden, we're having ourselves an awesome offseason. But that's pretty much the strategy to go for me. Are you gonna get the best players at every spot? I mean, no. We have 51 overall D potential relief pitcher here. I mean, that's terrible, right? So yeah, you're gonna have some bad players on your roster. At the end of the day, it's okay. Some people will say you need to have A and B potential players at every spot on the roster. It's just not the case. The reality is there are a lot of players needed in an MLB franchise, much more than you need in a Madden franchise, much more than you need, especially in like a 2K franchise. So at the end of the day, you need bodies. And let's just say we sign a bunch of relievers and we were to release him. If we were to release this player, all it would cost is 45 grand. You know, that's not a lot. It's not gonna hurt us that much. So that's why I recommend just signing everybody. So Taurus to the Rockies, that's fun. So we got here baseball meetings. This is the next thing to happen in the offseason here on the 8th. And if you simulate through it, you have the draft lottery. And if you have a high pick, I would recommend, you know, going to it to see. I think we have like the worst odds in the lottery. So we're just going to simulate it in this case. And then the last big thing in the offseason is the Rule 5 draft. This is where you can take players from other teams who don't have players on their 40-man roster. Now, it's not every single player they don't have on their 40-man roster. They have to have a certain amount of experience. Honestly, don't know exactly what it is. But if you have a hole on your team, maybe we need another reliever. Hey, we can sign a Joe Barlow to add to the bullpen. I typically like at least taking one guy, maybe two, to add to your bullpen if there's a solid option available. We added one guy. Now, guys in the Rule 5 draft, they have to stay on your MLB 26-man roster for the entire season. So don't just go drafting anybody, because you can't play them in AA to get their stats up. They need to play at the MLB level. So after that, you continue to simulate. You'll see more trades, and there are a ton of trades in this one. In my Colorado Rockies draft only franchise, we have trades tuned down a bit, and now I see why. I mean, my goodness, just massive trades all the time. Now, if you have your arbitration negotiations go to this point where they didn't re-sign, this is where the arbitration that happens in February. You'll see stars throughout here. That's when it decides whether they're paying what they wanted or if you're paying what you wanted. And then you simulate here through the offseason. Juan Soto goes to the Blue Jays for just $21 million a year. We probably could have got in on that. Again, if I was doing more than just making a video, I was doing a franchise and he was available that late, probably would have jumped on it. Now, the one last thing is, because I kind of put the spring training in as off season. If you don't want the game to automatically call players up, you're trying to keep them in the minors, even though maybe they're one of your higher rated players at a certain position, you have to, before you simulate to the regular season, I mean, you can simulate spring training, for example, if you wanted to, but before you get to the regular season, you have to get down to 26 players on your MLB roster. Every single player on your 40-man roster will be invited to spring training by the game. You can uninvite them if you want, but if I didn't want the game to make any roster decisions for me, I have to, before I get to opening day, before I simulate through spring training, I would have to take the 36 players that are on my MLB roster right now, assign them into AAA and AA, so I have less than 26 players on all three of those rosters. If you do that and you have setting lineups and rotation and everything on manual, the game will not do anything automatically for you. It'll allow you to make the changes yourself. So that is it for kind of my beginner's guide to the MLB the Show off season. This was a video request asked by the chat in one of my streams. Sorry it took so long. I initially forgot. Then I remembered, but I got sick and just didn't feel up to making this video. Hopefully this will help you navigate the MLB the Show off season so that you don't miss any key moments. Make sure, to wrap up, you have the required players. That's a big thing that I've heard is, oh, I got to opening day and I only have like 11 players for my AA team. Get 20 starting pitchers, 20 relieving pitchers, at least 7 catchers, and an average of 5 position players throughout the other position player spots. You'll have enough at every spot. You'll even have some room at single A. If you're not doing injuries, you could do a little bit less than that. But make sure you have enough players. That's the first big key. Make sure you're actually offering arbitration, not just the contract to the people on the arbitration screen, or else you might lose them. And just so that you know exactly what you're working with, if you don't want to sign anybody in the arbitration or tender contract screen, I would recommend releasing them. It's not mandatory, but it will give you an idea of exactly how many players are on your team at the start of free agency, so you can attack free agency from day one, knowing exactly how many players you need to sign. If you do these things, you will perform just fine in the MLB offseason. This much I can promise. Thank you for tuning in to this video. Hope it helped you out in some way, and if it did, please drop a like. We'll be back soon with more Colorado Rockies draft-only franchise content, and I'll see you then.